Hello, I am not a lawyer. I am not interbranch. I am not military. It takes someone who is a regular citizen outside of court to liberate not just free speech, but correlation nature's words and logic proper. Admit what is actually recorded are individually grouped in together. How types of experts originally instilled were forced by a breaching method, invested by a breaching method, tricked by a breaching method. Already in those other nations involved with it too, and where we are fact-cheaping nature. This is a predicate acts delivery system method that is completely fact-cheaping nature oriented. That having been sustained undiscerned, however, it engineered human fact-cheaping nature styles, motivations, natures, needs, interests, juxtaposed of evil and of of criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments, self-valued as fact-cheaping nature styles, where and how account is logic evaluation styles, needs, natures as identity. What is most critical to computers, for example, is simultaneous. One definition, one part of what is simultaneous is the identity of relativity that has individual grouped and together three distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous identities of volume as value as nature / nature as value simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. So it is invisible but is still discernible. Only the extent of it / s of it is debatable. And it is in demonstration of where we came from and of how there could be temporary positive, that is temporary / lasting negative value nature. Only to the, and that temporary positive is the extent you want to be. That's where heaven and hell came from, this per science of ancients that was tactically tricked, hurt, persuaded, forced, propagated, not realizing as human identity bonded, tactically ulterior from how we are bonded actually, individually grouped together. Not to be apart, grouped to see what is invisible, to discern those three identities of volume individually grouped in together. So people who are black, white, all the cultures are forcing that to mean something it doesn't. Otherwise you don't have a free speech. And there are styles as fake sides. For example, preventing what the predicate acts delivery system method from being told about. Offensively, this is maintained per a method. For example, that knew that, you know, the summaries they have of American history, you can't defend that and tell what James Madison did. How they had to force everyone to fight. Or the breaching method roles they had everyone forced to. They were fact-cheaping nature oriented. They were physically oriented. But first they were fact-cheaping nature oriented. And that was all sustained. So it was a whole bunch of motivations, Nietzsche's interests involved with what is real. For example, when they were talking about everyone else's and their own identities in this. And defending that. Defending styles of defenses of that. Having defenses of, with it as a defenses of uses of logic. That is preventing anyone who's using logic properly with short words from having short words, while stacking roles with fabricated audio and video that each modern nation is involved with. Because where this is a completely fact-cheaping nature oriented predicate acts delivery system method already kept it, everything sustained way other. I mean, way worse. But where it is a fact-cheaping nature oriented and defended, that is a style is individually grouped in together, not just in an identity of negative value nature progression. All positions of sophistication. What slavery was about was entrenched here since before that plan was it before our founding parents were even born, before the parents of the nations that were involved with the colonization of America. Note that had sickly, distinctly, and non-distinctly slavery in the North and the South. People have the right to pretend to say that they think it's genocide, whatever. It was something other. They employed everyone to roles as what would be a perpetual breaching tool, pretending other, breaching screen, breaching weapons, worse, to all identity ground locations, where and how all identity ground locations are a value/value progression, where and how our fact-cheaping nature has another value/value progression system. This has nothing to do with the people who speak about value, things like that. Anywhere you hear it. This is about that native, where we are all native on the paper, by its system though. By its what is positive or negative to it, its way, which is its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, not only increasingly, but increasingly onto three identities of semi-nature simultaneously, distinctly, not distinctly, simultaneously, where and how it is making more of itself. One identity of value/value progression that came since before physics. Now, this is not only most probable, but we will also examine how, as victims, they made victim predators, in other words, modern nations, defending fact-cheaping nature in relationship to positive nature answers treatments that can't defend that, and not self-value collusion with all locations with the breaching method that caused it. Through everyone know. So a whole bunch of other real motivations for evil, fake positive roles in collusion with it. How could it be collusion? Fact-cheaping wise. We have, this is a method that works the same way computers have to work in relationship to their engineering. This is where, because both space and existence have the value of a slash, where and how they are both semi-nature relationships with the value of the slash. Since before physics, space and existence were two semi-natures of their complete shared identity of value/value progression, which is one identity, its identity of relation to itself, and the value of that. It is at least that. We don't have to, and we're not supposed to agree on the name. And there are exceptions in exception nature. But that's per conversation that also has offensively prevented, for example, with collusion with the opinions and the convictions of the religions, per their collusion with the medicine and medical doctors of logic and of psychology, originally and still recorded as evidence, unaddressed and offensively prevented by styles of logic, keeping that, pretending reasons and background that are not real, getting away with it because of how we're vertical and horizontal, for example, life progressions. For example, positions relative to positions of correlation nature, which are originally prevented. Quality of fact treatment nature of science, not criminally foreign influence. A premise of treatment is not criminally foreign influence. Of sequence treatment is not criminally foreign influence. Of breaching screen roles, not criminally foreign influence. Uses of the identities of our founding parents and pretending because it hurts kids' feelings if they tell it right. For example, one of the methods of a whole bunch of arrays of opinions that are preventing what is actually recorded, which is where and how James Madison, since before Marbury versus Madison, our founding parents had to hide their roles. With the phase of going into nationhood, where modern nations are still as, not just with, this semi-ancient trap, self-valued, because no one saw through, because everyone was invested, blaming other things, others themselves, for what bonded originally and still fake care and fake identities of positive and negative treatments. The overt criminal enterprises are most furthered by this, which is most, the most, when I say most, that's differentially. Exceptions in exception nature have an identity they share. There is an identity of relativity per science. There is a volume science, that volume theory, that the theory of theory of relativity. There are used to teach, are used in collusion with that which keeps from all locations, collusion with itself, its method, on off campuses of each age and nature, all exceptions like homeschool, on off private databases simultaneously, on off what really furthers the overt criminal enterprises, on off what trains everything, including the service people associated with, like they have to have the meal people brought in and things like that, and everyone talks. That is already self-cultivated, having breaching method propagated, breaching method exploited, human fact treatment nature. In other words, they had to hide life progressions. The existence of slavery as a law is in demonstration of a whole bunch of simultaneous things. Nature itself, nature being identity, its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that increasing. It demonstrates negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. It demonstrates that our where and how our temporary positive is only negative value nature, as criminal and seditious nature is in demonstration. For example, there are natures of truth and of facts that are not real, that are used as lies, and are self-valued used as lies. There is one identity of truth that is also all exceptions and all exception nature, not denied. Then this is again in relationship to how I short words, American, each age of fact treatment nature. You'll examine. See, but you can't get mad and blame the wrong things, or blame what is the real things, are the real things, by leaving out with the rest of it, because it already had the branches of government originally still in collusion with that. They had no right to have those laws. The only exception is, in other words, there is no exception, but in other words, that predicate acts delivery system method, that breaching method, that our founding parents weren't allowed and didn't have the logistic security and freedom to tell about. They were fact treatment nature slaves. They were physical slaves, time treatment nature wise. Everyone was as forever nature. Now, see, you say, oh, but it's worse. Of course, it was worse. That's because we're not addressing it as a predicate acts delivery system method, as a breaching method. See, predicate acts, these are legal terms. Criminal insidiousness nature. Predicate acts, these are things associated with criminal enterprises that are interstates and or internations. In this case, it is worse than that. Only extent of it is debatable. And see, but we have what is debated and styles the debate and of logic offensively, criminally foreign influenced, self-value that way. For example, where they have roles with standards of testing the logic of someone, testing the intelligence of people. Those identity of the ground locations, all the identity of the ground locations. There are so many ways, like how the original zoning laws and pathology of homes forced by that breaching method that used slavery sickly, distinctly, and non-distinctly, not just because they were different nations that colonized the North and South, because they were colonized by the same thing. They were forced to roles, not just America. To be a modern nation, you had to be what James Madison saw coming, which is worse, but it's still the same thing, because until we could liberate his stolen our identity, and the narratives that are pretending they don't realize, breaching, screening it, everyone, each age of it sickly, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. All we need is recorded. Correlation nature is evidence. It is that identity of volume that is inherent, active, and progressive, bonded also by an identity of volume as value as nature / nature as volume, that which is more finite than three identities of zero, while simultaneously being greater than infinity. As wood is making more and more forever nature, as more and more infinity nature, more and more inseparable from a complete nature's complete identity of value and its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that, simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously / simultaneously, non-distinctly, and distinctly. This is what the ancients revealed. The top of the Z of the English alphabet points back towards A, where evolution, where Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to the rest of space nature is first while being, and from beyond a little distinctly further, its identity of relationship to itself and the value of that. So Earth is where it can make more temporary / lasting positive that is also positive unto itself. Its complete identity, that which is simultaneous to positive and to negative, as what is negative, positive and negative is unto you. And where you are value as nature / nature as value. It is where and how one identity of volume science reveals is inseparable from all others. It is invisible but still discernible. And the ancients used the halo and A and W in the English language to teach this. A on the left side of the halo and W on the right side. On the website of Yale University, they have a picture of Jesus Christ with the halo behind him, with A on the left side of his head and W on the right side. And I'm the guy who deciphered it. And he had to put it in decipher because he was born in semi-ancient times. And latter semi-ancient times. And in semi-ancient times, already and archetypal criminal enterprises have begun its phases of a method that effectively maintains self-value roles, the entire species identity of volume, within as what can only increasingly self-value the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, blame the other things, others, and selves, then defending that as styles of fact cheap nature as timed to that are what are used to keep the same way if there is one overall logic to all the different syntax, there to all the different systems individually grouped and together. So the letters of the English language have individual grouped and together they have relationships distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. English is better than living. Each letter spells out a word, and each word spells out a sentence. And it is another way to understand the word, but you have to have the grounded definition too. For example, A stands for alpha. This is where and how identity is volume, as value as nature / nature as value simultaneously, which is where and how the / is a quality of diffusion. Life equals value as nature / nature as value simultaneously, as three bonded identities of volume, as the cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall are three bonded identities of volume, also to the other cell walls, and also to that nature of itself, as value as nature / nature as value, where and how the gases, like the carbon gases, are coming in, and the oxygen is being expelled, like with plants. Through there are 1 / 3 / 5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature that are as the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, because this evolved from its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that simultaneously bonded. Part of it is bonded as an identity of volume, as value that is increasing, that is more finite than three identities of zero. So it will never come into temporary / lasting space nature, but one way. But the simultaneous value of that, which is the identity of volume, that is also the order of the finite. It is the value of the smallest detail, thing, the smallest thing, Baxing. It is simultaneously the order of what is active. It is the value of the order of what is active. It is all, and that is again simultaneously individually grouped together. That is manifest that way because of, for example, because of how the inherent active and progressive are three bonded identities of its one identity of volume. And that's why also the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. See how cell walls connect, not just the body of value, physical but invisible. The whole identity of value / value progression. The ancients understood how we are a value / value progression distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as the ground, and not as the ground. I'll gather round. This is about Romulus science. And this is where women and men were never liberated distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, sickly. But everyone missed how sickly, non-distinctly, not by accident. Everyone self-valued it. So they're preventing people to short words. Because the branches of government, for example, the people who have computers and the people who watch TV but they don't have computers and or do, they're keeping us separated. Roles with the method that is relevant to all the recorded methods and motivations other than its own. So we have to have mandated law followed. But the interbranch has been using the right to lie, and has been using identity of the ground locations of their very departments. For example, the Chicago FBI and the New Haven FBI, they're recorded, confessed, demonstrated, and confirmed. They have people pretend, oh, they say more than involved with more predicate acts on, off, and more sequence shifts and wrongdoing and on-off locations interbranch, leading up to and in the World Trade Center attack, leading up to and in a 2006 part of a case/S, with the defendant, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and 3 of his defendants recorded, confessed, demonstrated, involved with predicate acts with databases, which I'm not a lawyer, but I can demonstrate to you were the worth of them. Note how they hid the video I recorded of the person who went to a private school, who I had nothing to do with. And then they tried to pretend other again after Rick Sion Fagley had graduated, because of how New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts and other Connecticut courts were all recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles of predicate acts on off my street and on off through time, and roles in with between people, and on off courts and campuses, intercities, into when I was in 6th grade. What was his further confessed is recorded through intercities. New Britain has a Central Connecticut State University that has 3 cities over. That was confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed to me since and when I was in 6th grade. It was involved with a former mayor's Gold's daughter and a O'Brien family, involved with other people I didn't have classes with, like the O'Brien family, and in other words, with database, with vertical, horizontal, connected database, organized crime method that is also, it's worse than war crimes, but it's subtle because it's fact-cheaping nature oriented. It's evidence, in other words, and cover-ups of that. The second you hear that slavery was entrenched, you should discern, and should have been taught to discern how a predicate acts delivery system method was sustained upon the people. Now say such is still sustained upon people. Such is still sustained, for example, where they pretend, okay, so well, if everything's working correctly, it's going to have to deal with money, so we have to figure out how the people are going to get money. They know that, in other words, those are people who are offensively, when it comes down to it, you have to look how they prevent mandated law. How, like, there are all these child abuses and roles with it. We have interbranch women involved with this. Originally and still. We have the men. Everyone blaming other things other than themselves. When that's correct, they leave out exception nature. Self-valued, the same identity, styles as the same breaching screen of the same identity of negative value nature progression. Self-valued, right through what helps us, modern nations, right between us. No, we can use correlation as evidence. we could see, we could use hyper forgiveness to show what can't take hyper forgiveness. When they make the presidents look bad and look good in collusion, both ways, simultaneously. And they talk about what it looks like. Because underlying that are roles with collusion, with that which effectively maintains overt criminal enterprises, private criminal enterprises for self-valued originally still. Unrealized method, keeping that in everyone in all locations further and further in, but also as self-cult, self-valued. Where and how? That's only permitted. Where and how? You have to understand what they're doing they're asking people about feelings at each age. In relationship to where and how, they have criminal insidiousness nature and lie progressions and sequence shifts, identity thefts and frauds and uses of them, and rackets where they're spreading illusions through kids. I never had anything to do with Rick Faglione when I was a kid. I mentioned the exceptions a couple times. There's a Leahy family, 2 people with the name Brendan Leahy, at least, and other men and women in their family involved with medical organized crime, and worse than that war crimes. Roles with people with the World Trade Center in the Washington, D.C. leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context, and since with the investigators of it. Also with people with foreign and domestic military. Now these are people that faked conversations with me, and just because they're from my town, in conjunction with the people that I never had a conversation with. I wouldn't say like one time a Rick Faglione asked me if I wanted to buy his tackle box, and that's on Hangdog Lane. Note the name of that name, which will come to this, because this is also where George Washington had to come to this town right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War to secure the help of the French general. And don't forget, that was only to be a fake nation yet. A still sick nation, a real but sick modern nation. Collusion with and as it, self-value. The same thing that breached them before that. Needed to pretend needed to keep each age of correlation nature from correlation nature. Per method that works as easily as computers work. Once they're all set up. It's not hard at all. This is where exploiting where we are space/existence. And both space, existence, and ourselves. That is semi-nature relationship. To the one identity of volumes. One identity of relationship to itself. And the increasing value of that to us. And as all things. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, Earth's value. Making more positive is also positive here, or it's forced from here, Leith of Hadith. Science reveals this. Science reveals, correlation reveals. The ancients would define Leith of Hadith as forced space nature transfer. See, we have takes on religion that are self-valued by people that are making, in other words, there are people that force drugs into people. I'm not on any drugs, by the way, under oath. But there are people that want to put me on drugs, and they faked conversations with me. These are the people also involved with the sequence shift proven in the Ninth Circuit Court right before the World Trade Center attack. Post-dated what had been brought to the Ninth Circuit Court and brought on time and time-stamped in the court. And then it was presented to the panel of judges. right before the World Trade Center attack. But they had been presented papers that had been post-dated from inside the court, changing the date of the timely handed in legal papers. So they ruled it was handed in late. Then it was proven that it was handed in timely. That led to a 2006 Connecticut, and I was in Manhattan, right next to the World Trade Center towers. There's a Ninth Circuit Court there. So that note those tie illusions, because there are other ties, foreign and domestic, there. See, this is where we have good Saudis, bad Saudis, and this fake side that maintains itself fluent. Because we had, in other words, we have to have a place where we can have fact-cheaping nature counters to things, to the causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And it rolls with that. Which is where and how nations know, but wrongly, they have to counter predicate acts. They have to counter criminal insidious natures of positive and negative treatments simultaneously, of identity treatments. See, but this breaching method knew that they could make them that and make them styles of logic that can't defend that and us from what exploits them live progression from their standing spots of discorrelation by that identity that is the nature of the law, which is its identity of relation to itself, and the value of that, which is greater than while being the value of, which is more finite than while being the value of the nature of the law and law. This timeless course. It's all dropped before us. Even arts and theater like that. So we have sick minds that don't know how to deal with positive and negative because of how this is uses of all identity ground locations. All styles needing to self-value how there's only been. So there's a trail of the perfect world forsaken. A role self-valuing that because everyone is needing to react to what is simultaneously too much to counter as that quality of fact-cheaping nature that forsakes the perfect world. Science is led by the perfect world. It is led by an identity of truth that is true always, not denying exceptions, the exception nature. So they are offensively preventing American history from being told. It is also recorded they have uses of words like evidence and like studies. The people who use those words are already consciously aware that they need to hide what they are actually simultaneously aware of. Because, in other words, all identity of the ground, locations, sickly distinctly, but they were effectively originally used by a breaching method that effectively forced everyone to blame what it did and does on other things other than selves, individually grouped and together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, in demonstration of how what is actually the identity of relativity, the identity of volume science simultaneously, the identity that space/existence are semi-nature relationship to, as your cell nucleus, as the cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall is semi-nature relationship to the organs and the system and the part of the body it is of. Not a doctor, not police form, not criminal. Their collusion and their styles offensively pretending other and how they pretend that. It's also evidence. In other words, a lot of things. You have to study how nature demonstrates negative value nature progressions, acts, natures, in demonstration of slavery. It also demonstrates that it's an identity That if you go by its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that is the perfect world, making more of that identity of volume, making more. It's also its identity of relationship to itself. Its volumes of the value of that to its volume is only increasing. All exceptions in exception nature. For example, that's only Leith of ID is an example. See, what the infrastructure of the suburbs, let alone what they forced as exceptions to that. See, the ancients would teach about exceptions in exception nature distinctly from how it is taught now, because of how they have to get over on people who know they're lying, and how they keep the breaching method keeps our branches and everyone else needed to pretend they don't realize everyone lying, and pretend to be against it while they know they're lying, fabricating audio and video, hiding their mistakes by their collusion with all tied to them, like prisons, like the people that service, do the laundry. Every identity, ground, location has people and communicating, has fact treatment nature styles, premises treatment, sequence treatments, identity treatments, then defended increasingly, perpetually, incapable of defending that and ourselves from what exploits every location, area, and state this way, every single person. It is not complicated. So the police, for example, they just pretend not to believe people as the law told them not to do. And because they have interbranch sources, CNN, for example, Fox News, MSNBC, other nations, countries, they have sources that are lying to them interbranch. And if we admit this, it cripples further. Only let realize here there are hundreds of modern nations at once, all identity laws, identities of the law, criminally foreign influence premises treatments, sequence treatments, finite, active, progressive treatments, identity treatments simultaneous treatments. See, we have real motivations for excuses. Like, well, this is only my course. I'm only supposed to teach this about computers. It's about what is simultaneous, what will reveal what they're doing, which is great with the computers. But what they're doing with fact treatment nature, what they're doing with difference, what they're doing with what they're doing the reading as of statutes. At the last second, they have to give priority to identities of titles. That doesn't mean that the identity of the titles are supposed to force that last second so they can exploit that. A breaching method knew they would. Sickly, distinctly interstates. So, vaccine. It tells us things. The boxing and the martial arts were revealed as part of a science before criminal foreign influence had taken over the science. They knew what criminal foreign influences were. They had found out. And it makes criminal insidious natures, like wrongdoers, wrongdoing, styles of logic, of fact treatment nature, of identity ground treatments, a sequence shifting nature. When people are going to see each other, both people, everyone not realizing, because it's how each age of fact treatment natures, correlation nature's actual difference, which is increasingly simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously the same subject, but now we're parted from this subject, which it works with where value is nature / nature is value simultaneously, because it is invisible. but is the invisible but still discernible. So there is a volume science that is individual grouped in together. Ages, areas, sexes. It is the invisible but still discernible in demonstration to us. What needs to keep correlation nature and science is actual answers. Where especially when you don't have computers and you can't hear me. If you know people that don't have computers and can't hear them, we'll put something up. So tell them and say, let's put something up for the people, the most forsaken areas. All we have to do is claim that. All we have to do is set this bottom where everything could only rise, not by having the bottom hard, by having the sciences repaired, by having the native value/value progression. It's ties to our fact-keeping nature, not prevented. It's words, because people have to pretend to be about truths and facts without realizing styles of uses of it themselves, being and having been employed to breaching acts, methods, and roles. It has both in criminal and ceases natures of positive and of negative opinions and convictions about anything, especially people's identities. Know how all parts of computers work with identity. All identity ground locations in conjunction with identities of the law, they can't defend that and afford, discern how and why computers work the way they do, which is they put the space location of the data, the temporary/lasting data stream. Then they put it in types of data. Now you put it into the calculator. It's going to perform a type of function. They're going to teach about that function distinctly from the person who's going to build the physical hardware of the computer, from how they're going to teach it about to a person who's going to program the computer. Program with the working computer. And they teach it non-distinctly. But they don't teach what forces that, which is its distinct identity, non-distinct relationship to itself, and the value of that, which is only increasing. And that has a relationship to what is temporary positive, that is also constantly an increasingly positive or negative relationship to itself. So where Earth has a temporary, hyper-concentrated, positive relationship to its identity, compared to the rest of space nature, using correlation nature, using science, Leith of Hadith demonstrates humanity are one little species of the entire species, all those species of the Earth. Too long, it has been the cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Self-value, while everyone was pretending other, per motivations other, per a method, per one simple method. It's only extensive. But you have to understand the theft of the voices and the identities of our founding parents. They forced everyone to sick roles. And this is a science that knows what people have to say in response to when people hurt them, and who they have to say it to. And they have those people fabricating audio and video, rather than just putting fake transcripts. They have other methods and motivations, natures, needs, interests, types of identity thefts and frauds that are all bound by one. And we can demonstrate this. People pretending to be about voting and sides, that political branch, both parties of government and the alternatives. When slavery comes up, it is hyper demonstrated. Intercultural, white, black, worse than criminally incompetent when it comes to speaking about anything tied to such. It's everyone's victim. Then you say it, and they're like they're talking bad about you. You were talking bad about them. Then they say things bad about you, but they won't let you report things like child abuses because of how they have the agency's directors, because of how they have FBI already invested, took roles with this other method of organized crime. Now we start admitting this. We have to use what it came through, which is ourselves, our identity ground locations. That means we have to use people's sense and sensibilities, individually grouped and together. That means we have to use their styles of positive and negative treatments, of reaction to theater treatments, where the news is directed how to cover lie progressions, where they have to cover lies, because hundreds of nations are sick together, per motivations missed, because they have nothing to do with anything on paper realized, or anything realized. It has to do with these methods once they take part of them. It has to do with a vertical, horizontal database, exploiting method, but it's consolidated, kept first all locations, and that used to keep further lie progressions, further standing positions of sophistication, all needing to self-value, correlation nature tricks, identity theft roles, correlation sabotage, worse than obfuscate. Evolution only feels like games. So we have people that need to pretend they are about integrity. By pretending, that means to have an appearance like they don't do anything wrong, while they simultaneously pretend other people do things like drink and things like that, drugs. They pretend fake things into databases. This has been through time. Now, this is also how all that tied to each age and nature of campus in collusion with this, from off campuses. And also it already had it from off campuses, on off it, self-valued, how off it, blamed on other things other than selves. That's shown through the illusions. Like, for example, they have mayors. They have mayors' family members forced to hide sequence shifts, pretend illusions through people. So they would say, oh, did you witness that? But they ask them away. In other words, a Debbie Gold sequence shifted, and she made people pretend I was in a location or conversation with her and never was. And she was just screaming and names at me. And I don't know what I said. I call her a name or something like that. And then they told me to give a note to my parents because of that. I didn't give it to them. I should have given it to them. And then there was nothing else about it. There was a former Mayor Gold and like a detective's family, police foreman's family, an O'Brien family. When I was in grammar school, there was also Mr. There were people that are brought into this, which is relevant to the discussion and to this lesson and to the liberation of American history's telling. and answer the questions properly. What caused slavery? Forced roles with a predicate acts delivery system method. How those roles were self-valued, were forced fact-achieving nature progression roles anyway. Uses of people's names, use of people's identities that way. Anyway, everyone forced to speak through others. Everyone's forced to speak for themselves. All those contexts individually grouped and together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, used to fabricate things into databases. Used to have further impressions of collusion to that, discollusion with that, all in collusion with the method everyone missed. No one fathomed. So they knew that they would have to blame the real causes of predicate acts and of criminal insidious natures of all locations on other things other than themselves. This method has police forms foreign and domestic in collusion with the uses of all locations, with the uses of physical cultures, pretending they believe them to mean what they don't. In other words, because they're preventing actual correlation nature. Because where the branches of government individually grouped and together are criminally involved with the overt criminal enterprises, private, other nations, and the predicate acts delivery system method as is actually recorded. We'll examine this. They have to, they have to blame other things, other stuff. They have to hide live progressions. So where we have great places, they need to have stayed evil for other motivations, real, but not the breaching methods, which knew that they would have to have such, which knew that they would have to go to the breaching method to cover it up, which knew that it could invest all locations, areas, and states further and further, controlled by what no one discerns, and follow mandated law. They have the national media is so far recorded in collusion with crime methods, worse than election crime methods, of pretending people make conspiracy theories. I need one journalist to help me, please. For example, they have just people fabricating audio and video into databases, forging names, switching names. They have judges. They have the branches of government individually grouped and together using crime methods, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And that's evidence. That is also involved with where and how. That is what is used to keep them self-valued rules with what is keeping that the outcome/S, which is a predicate acts delivery system method we're going to refer to as an archetypal criminal enterprise. And so Little Rap Guy and Friends are about as an anti-archetypal criminal enterprise, where the entire world is extorted in the cartoon value nature system. For example, itself and Little Rep Guy and Friends, they are a scientific tool, because evolution science only feels like games. I'm going to show you what Marbury versus Madison meant and means. And we have to use for evidence, which is actually recorded, how lawyers and how the branches of government and how about all this other, all private, all that, are in collusion with predicate acts, delivery system method. Now, see, they could say, oh, he's making a conspiracy theory. And they're not debating anything I said, actually. Overall, they're making allegations. And to get away with it, they're relying upon their interbranch sources and upon that are recorded criminally foreign influence. Now, if we start talking about the proofs of that, it starts demonstrating it to other people in other countries that have the same problems, but we don't have it talking about it. So it further prostrates the only means we have to fact-cheating nature counter. Things that have the whole world with nuclear weapons pointed at each other. things that have modern nations going to wars but leaving out how the sciences are criminally foreign influence in our faces, overtly /